Good afternoon, everyone. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Slade Moore Jr. He has been an advocate within the Black community, inner city Philadelphia, for over 30 years and speaks on behalf of the voiceless, young men and women in search of second chances, while also being familiar with the writings of the scholars we have studied throughout our course. Mr. Moore will share with us significant personal challenges he has faced as well as overcome as it relates to oppression. Welcome, Mr. Moore.
Thank you.
Do you mind starting out and sharing with us ways you have found concepts, theories on dehumanization addressed and or applied in the readings?
Okay, well, in Freire's work, he spoke extensively of dehumanization, how the oppressor makes the oppressed less than human. They take actions to keep them oppressed, and in doing that, they dehumanize themselves as well. Because if you were truly human, you would not treat your fellow man as inhuman. And he went on to say that the only person that could rectify the problem is the oppressed, because only they can free themselves, and in doing so, free the oppressor as well. In Alexander's work, it was basically speaking about mass incarceration and how men and women are placed into cages just like animals and treated as such. In Freire's work, he referenced the difference between humans and animals being that animals have no concept of the future. They only think of today and their situation as it is. If you treat these prisoners as animals, then that's their outlook on life. They are not looking towards their future. They're only looking at the instant and the situation that they're in.
That's a very good point. And that also really brings to mind for me, once those that are incarcerated, once they're released, that's what also brings to mind the difficulties they face once they are back out into the free world.
Right.
It's a really good point. Thank you for that. Another point I wanted you to touch on, much of the framework where internalizing the oppressor is addressed. Can you share with the audience your thoughts on, or your position as it relates?
Okay, yes. In Freire's work, during the period of upheaval when there were the oppressed are trying to regain some of their humanization, there's a period of time whenever certain leaders step forward and they take on the challenge, they lead the charge, so to speak. But because they've been oppressed so long, they only know of how they've lived and how the oppressor has lived. So they sometimes take on the role of the oppressor whenever they're in the process of freeing themselves. They take on traits that would subsequently trickle down to the oppressed, and in doing so they would make them the heroes rather than fighting the good cause. In Alexander's work, she spoke of the civil rights era, where some of the lawyers of the time, they were leading the charge. But all of a sudden, it wasn't about the cause, it was about them winning their cases, about them being the forefront of the entire civil rights movement. So the process, it's intertwined with the freedom, with freeing yourself from the oppression, these internalized problems.
Very interesting. And I know for the sake of time, you have unfortunately experienced oppression as a black man growing up in the South in the 50s and 60s. If you don't mind sharing with us just a few memories, things that I'm sure that you have stuck with you throughout your adult, throughout your life and as an adult.
You're quite right. During that period of my life as a youngster, as youngsters do, I often got into some mischief. And it's amazing to see how the only difference in the way we were treated was because of the color of our skin. I can recall instances where we had 2 car washes in the area. The white kids hung out on one corner with their nice shiny cars. We hung out on another corner with our hoopties. And invariably the police would always come by and stop us, ask us what we're doing, just make us disperse whenever the other kids were going to hang out all night. There have been other instances where I can recall having to go into the back entrance of the movie theater. We couldn't go in the front where everyone else entered. We'd have to go into the back, and couldn't sit with the white kids. We'd have to go up into the balcony, far away from the screen. And it's just the way things were at that time. My wife had an incident where her dad took her to the dentist, and she spoke of having to go into the back door of the dentist's office, and rather than try to treat her gently, he just simply grabbed her, yanked the tooth out, and away you go, out the back door again. So it was those types of things that stick with you. And we all bear that problem. There's a quote that I always like to reference whenever I speak. It's from Frederick Douglass, powerful scholar in his own right. He said that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. And that's so true about how the oppressor will not relinquish their grasp on their power. But Douglass went on to say in that same quote, "Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows, or with both." And both Freire and Alexander spoke of grassroots organizations being fed up with the oppression and attempting to bring about change. So hopefully it will be without blows, but with reason. And if we cannot at least admit that there's a problem with racism after 400 years of slavery, it's going to be difficult to resolve the problem if we can't even talk about or define the issue itself.
Very powerful. You have really touched on reflective context from our readings, and it's interesting hearing how you have taken many of the odds stacked against you as a black man and applied it to action. I appreciate you sharing your personal experiences, and I look forward to reading your book you are looking to publish this upcoming year. Thank you again, Mr. Moore.
Thank you for having me.